let's dig into another topic here because there are plenty to talk about in this NFL offseason. Obviously, just a few days out of NFL free agency, which I mean, free agency is still going on, but
Yes.
there's like this 2 day window where there's legal tampering period. It was March 10th to March 12th. And that's really where free agency happens. I mean, once the
Mhm.
12th hits, almost every free agent has had some sort of destination. Now, as we just mentioned with Rodgers, we still have a couple. Russell Wilson, there are a couple still out in the air, but the majority, I'd probably say 90% of free agents that are going to sign and at least make an impact for next season have already found their destination. So, with that being said, I feel like we can have a good conversation about who are the winners and some losers in this one. And we should dig into some winning ones. And I see you got a little flag behind you right here. And I would say
Yeah.
they are a solid winner in the free agency. What would you say about those New England Patriots?
I do think the Patriots are making all the right moves right now. There is some kind of outcry for more offensive moves. But at the end of the day, obviously the one that everyone kind of leans towards, like the big signing, was Milton Williams. And I think he'll make an enormous impact on this team. And across the board, I saw something on Twitter, and I don't know how accurate it is. And this is also a couple days old, but the Patriots spent like 220, almost 223 million in free agency. And so that was kind of what we expected last year from Gerard Mayo. They talked about him saying, "Oh, we've got all this money," and then it just didn't ever really pan out. Seems like Vrabel's kind of making the right moves. A little bit of a defensive heavy focus, unless you consider Mac Hollins maybe a wide receiver one. But I don't hate that. In my philosophy, which I'm not a head coach, but it's always been to like pick up the guys that have been in the league and we know that they're legit. And then you can go from there. On offense, Drake May is obviously the guy moving forward, and you take a chance on maybe a wide receiver, an area the Patriots have been lacking heavily for a few years. But your defense, if it's going to be solid the way it was last year, you just don't need to score that many points. So I don't hate those moves, and I do think that this was kind of the biggest win, not only for the Patriots in recent years in free agency, but in the league as a whole. Who would you pick over the Patriots right now? They made a ton of noise.
Yeah, I think there's one team that rivals them, but I think the Patriots are definitely one of the winners for sure in free agency this year. Speaking of these Patriots, you talk about Mac Hollins. I mean, he had a great year in Buffalo. I mean, he showed a lot of production with the Bills. $8.4 million deal for 2 years. That's not a bad deal at all for him. I
No.
don't know if he should be a wide receiver one, and I don't know if
No,
you're
no,
going
come
to
on.
get that. I think it's something like a 3 or a 4. If you could get him to be that, that's a solid production. I mean,
I
Drake
look at
May, if
Mac is a veteran. It's kind of his role. Like we were talking about the
he's a
quarterbacks.
he's a guy that you can give reliable targets to, and you're going to be able to get a throwing, good throws to. And when you have a young quarterback like Drake May, who's trying to be more comfortable in the system, you had a lot of young wide receivers on that team last year. So if
Yeah,
you get someone that has shown consistency, I think that's a really good feeling. I like what they did in the trenches. I really did. I
I
like what
do.
they added with Morgan Moses. I like what they did with Milton Williams. And I think Milton Williams is probably the biggest risk, although it's one of my favorite free agent signings. He was great with his pressure rate with the Eagles last year, but look who was around him as well, right? There
Yeah,
was a lot of players, a lot of great players around him as well. Can that pressure rate stay up? Now, 4 years, $104 million. I really hope so.
hope
That
so.
was really the only big deal they signed, though, with the exception of
Well,
like,
Carlton Davis, I didn't mention him, but that was a great snag from the Lions. The corner there, 3 or 60 million. Not quite on the same plane as Milton, but that's another one. And then you've got Gonzo, I think it's Christian Gonzalez on the other side. Like the
yeah,
secondary could be just unbelievable for these guys. And like, yeah, I just think over across the board, excluding offense, they did a very good job. And they made some moves on offense, don't get me wrong. But the philosophy they were talking about was let's get guys through the free agency and then we'll draft for potential. We don't have to draft for needs. And I think that was you can kind of see that outside of the wide receiver position in the moves they made.
yeah. And the running back room is loaded in the NFL draft. I think there's some decent wide receivers as well. A couple from your Iowa State for sure that would look really good in the Patriots uniform next season. There's a lot of really fun pieces on the offensive side that they could build up in the draft. And I think that Mike Vrabel's doing this right. He's grabbing some veteran guys on the defense. He's a defensive-minded coach. He's got to get that side of the ball right first, and then he can focus on Drake May and the rest of them. They have their quarterback. They got to be able to protect him. I think adding guys like Moses and they signed another guard as well is great. We talked about Carlton Davis. Did you see his opening press conference? He was coming in and they were like excited to be here. And he's
Oh,
like,
I did see
he's like,
that.
no applause. Like, what is it? It
Yes.
was so awkward. It was so awkward. So hopefully that doesn't change anything with the team and everything. But Drake May, we talk about the offensive tackle and the weapons. He was terrible when it came to being protected last year. Only a 21.5% pressure to rate sack rate. I mean, that's huge. If you look at that, that's ranked 43rd in the NFL last season. First off, I don't even have to explain it to you. There's only 32 teams in the NFL. If you look at the title of our show there, Nick. So if you're after 32, that's a problem.
Not a good sign.
Not a good sign at all. I mean, but the completion rate, that's pretty good. 66%. That's about league average, a little bit higher if I remember. So the potential is there. And I think we've all known this. I think there was a huge debate of him possibly going 1-1 last year for the longest time. I think you could make the debate for all three of the quarterbacks who were drafted last year. I think all three of those quarterbacks are going to have very good careers. They just have to be built around. Speaking of that, that's what I want to get into next. And I think the winner of free agency, in my opinion, is the Chicago Bears. I really like what Chicago did. I think they did even more. Now, they were in a way better situation to begin with than New England was. Their defense looked a little better. They had the offensive weapons. They have DeAndre Swift. They have some great wide receivers that they picked up last year as well. Obviously, Caleb Williams, he had some terrible pressure sack rates as well last year, but they built in the trenches. They built exactly what was needed to help that team move to the next step. Ryan Poles, to me, is on the hot seat. I know that he just drafted a franchise quarterback. He just brought in Ben Johnson. I don't think those two are going to be tied together. I don't think Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles are going to be tied together. I think Ryan Poles is on the hot seat, especially after some of these moves that he made. Brings Jonah Jackson in from the LA Rams. Love that trade. Brings Joe Thuney in from the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, that one could backfire because if the Kansas City Chiefs are moving on from you, that might mean that there's a decline moving down. At least what we've seen over the last couple of years, Kansas City knows when to move on from players, but the name is exciting and hopefully he can step up. Drew Dalman signed a 3-year contract, probably the best center picked up in the free agency world. Grady Jarrett coming over. I mean, it was just a lot of really good pieces being added by the Chicago Bears in the trenches. And to me, not only are the Bears the biggest winner, but Caleb Williams is the biggest winner of free agency.
Well, it's clear that they had one focus going into free agency, and it was to bolster up their line. And I love that. We talked about Drake May and his struggles with pressure, just having so much pressure. But Caleb Williams, it was like insane what he was going through. So for them to target that and to be able to put Caleb in a position to win and to succeed, like make plays, that's exactly what you need to do with a guy like that. Otherwise, you kind of risk just losing the talent, right? Kind of wasting that away. So I like that they did that at the time that they did. And I like a lot of these pickups as well. And then obviously Ben Johnson and what he's the new kind of mindset towards this team. I'll be very interested to see. The Bears should be able to make noise, and it looks like it could be another year of the NFC North just being an absolute powerhouse of 4 teams. But the Bears are the Bears at the end of the day. So I don't I mean, they got to beat that.
Is the Bears an NFC contender right now? NFC
Right
North
now?
contender. Let's go division.
Well, look at the rest of the
Vikings,
division.
Lions, Packers.
Yeah, it a lot of it depends on, does Aaron Rodgers go to the Vikings? Because then you're gambling on a rookie quarterback if he doesn't. And the Lions missing both their coordinators, like I could see a fall off there. So I would say the Bears are a contender, but it's an outside chance just because it's probably going to be them. The Packers will be good like they are every single year, and then there will be someone that we're like, oh my gosh, who expected JJ McCarthy to be the greatest quarterback this, like something like that'll happen. So, but I do think the Bears can make noise. It's just that they got to beat themselves first.
Okay, how about a playoff contender? Do you think they can make the playoffs right now? I think they can.
I think they could make the playoffs. I haven't looked at their schedule super close, so I don't know exactly what they're up against, but or what the strength schedule looks like either. I'm
Yeah,
sure
I
that's
don't
what
think
you're
I don't
pulling
think
up
it's released yet. Well, I think the opponents are released, but not who they when they play.
when
So
they play.
yeah,
And
we'll have to
I
see
mean,
what happens there.
yeah, timing
It's
is
and
actually
it's
important.
March.
So
It's March. It's before the NFL draft. I know we have plenty of time, and they have a lot of things to move, and we'll see what happens there. But to me, it's interesting. I think that the Bears are such an interesting franchise. Obviously, what we've seen happen over the past few seasons with them. I mean, what they did to get Trubisky. I mean,
yeah,
the last decade has been an absolute headache for them. If Caleb Williams
dumpster
doesn't work
fire.
out, yeah, if Caleb Williams doesn't work out, I mean, how you have to feel for this fan base. You absolutely have to feel for this fan base. But I think that it's going to work great, and I think that they're finding a way to build around him. They already have some good weapons. The trenches was a main focus. I want to see what their draft looks like, but I
Yeah.
think they're on the right path.